Jasmine Wright's manicured fingers trembled as she signed the document canceling the $200 million contract. Across the table, the airline CEO, who had mistaken her for a flight attendant hours earlier, now recognized his catastrophic error. "Perhaps next time," she smiled coldly, "you'll check who's in first class." Before we dive into this powerful story, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you believe in standing up against discrimination, hit that like button right now and subscribe to join our community of truth seekers. Ready to see how one woman's dignity changed an entire industry? Let's begin. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows of the Tech Fusion Global headquarters in downtown Chicago. At 42 years old, Jasmine Wright had built something extraordinary. The gleaming 60-story tower stood as a testament to her journey from working-class Detroit to becoming one of the most powerful Black female CEOs in America. Jasmine adjusted her tailored navy suit as she reviewed quarterly projections on her tablet. The numbers were impressive. Tech Fusion Global was now valued at $11 billion, with operations spanning 27 countries. Their innovative cloud security solutions and artificial intelligence platforms had revolutionized how corporations protected their digital assets. "Ms. Wright, your 9 o'clock is here," announced her assistant Malcolm through the intercom. "Send them in," Jasmine replied, her voice carrying the same confident tone that had negotiated billion-dollar deals and silenced boardroom skeptics. Growing up in Detroit's East Side, luxury had been an alien concept. Her father worked double shifts at the auto plant while her mother taught elementary school. They had sacrificed everything to nurture her exceptional aptitude for mathematics and computer science. A full scholarship to MIT had been her ticket out, followed by a Harvard MBA where she'd graduated top of her class. Malcolm entered carrying a leather portfolio. At 28, he had proven himself invaluable, anticipating Jasmine's needs before she voiced them. "I've finalized your San Francisco itinerary," he said, placing the portfolio on her desk. "Your meetings are scheduled back-to-back on Thursday, with the National Atlantic Airlines contract signing at 3. Jasmine nodded. "The National Atlantic deal is crucial for our expansion. Their $200 million investment will integrate our security technology across their entire fleet and digital infrastructure." "It's a game changer," Malcolm agreed. "Our technology will revolutionize the passenger experience while quadrupling their cybersecurity capabilities." Jasmine stood and walked to the window. Chicago sprawled before her, a city where she'd arrived 15 years ago with nothing but student debt and determination. She'd started Tech Fusion in a cramped apartment, coding through sleepless nights while rejection emails piled up from venture capitalists who couldn't seem to picture a Black woman leading a tech revolution. "Have they confirmed the first-class arrangements?" she asked. "Yes, National Atlantic has provided a complimentary first-class ticket. I've arranged for the car service to pick you up at 4:30 tomorrow morning." Jasmine nodded. She insisted on flying first class not from vanity, but practicality. The space allowed her to work undisturbed and arrive refreshed for high-stakes meetings. "Richard Whitman will be present for the signing," she confirmed, referring to National Atlantic's CEO. "Yes, along with their entire executive team. The press has been notified for the announcement afterward." As Malcolm departed, Jasmine turned back to the window. Despite her success, or perhaps because of it, she still encountered microaggressions regularly. Just last week at a tech conference, a man had asked whose assistant she was, even though she was the keynote speaker. Her response had been what it always was: excellence. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Excellence is the best response to prejudice. The National Atlantic contract represented more than revenue. It positioned Tech Fusion at the forefront of aviation security globally. After tomorrow's signing, competitors would be scrambling to catch up to her vision. She checked her watch, an understated Patek Philippe that had been her first major purchase after Tech Fusion secured its initial $1 million funding. Time to prepare for tomorrow's pivotal meeting. Little did she know that her journey to San Francisco would become about much more than a business deal. Chicago O'Hare International Airport buzzed with early morning activity as Jasmine Wright made her way toward the premium check-in counter. She traveled light, one carry-on Rimowa suitcase and a leather laptop bag containing everything needed for the 24-hour business trip. Her cashmere coat and simple pearl earrings reflected her personal style, understated luxury that emphasized competence over ostentation. "Good morning, Ms. Wright," greeted the ground staff member after glancing at her ID. "We're delighted to have you flying with National Atlantic today. Will you be checking any luggage?" "No, thank you," Jasmine replied with a warm smile. These pleasant interactions were common when her name was recognized from reservations. It was when she traveled anonymously that the real test of equal treatment emerged. After receiving her boarding pass for seat 2A in first class, Jasmine proceeded through the priority security lane and toward the first-class lounge. She spent 30 minutes reviewing contract details before the announcement for priority boarding of flight NA207 to San Francisco. Jasmine gathered her belongings and proceeded to the gate. A small queue had already formed in the priority boarding lane. She took her place behind an older white gentleman in a golf sweater. "First class and premier status members may begin boarding now," announced the gate agent. As the line moved forward, a flight attendant with Rebecca on her name tag glanced at Jasmine and stepped forward with a tight smile. "Excuse me, this lane is for first class and premier members only," she said loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. Jasmine maintained her composure. "Yes, I'm aware. I'm in first class." She extended her boarding pass. Rebecca barely glanced at it. "Are you sure you're in the right line? Economy boarding will begin shortly." The older gentleman ahead turned around, curiosity etched on his face. Other passengers watched the interaction. "I'm positive," Jasmine replied evenly. "Seat 2A, first class." Rebecca's expression remained skeptical. "May I see some identification, please?" Jasmine noted that none of the white passengers had been asked for additional verification. She produced her ID. "Is there a problem?" A gate agent approached, looking concerned. "Just verifying this passenger's boarding credentials," Rebecca explained, examining Jasmine's ID with unnecessary scrutiny. "I've already checked in and received my boarding pass," Jasmine stated. "Is there a specific reason I'm being asked for additional verification when others aren't?" The gate agent looked uncomfortable. "No problem, Ms. Wright. Please proceed. Aboard. We apologize for any inconvenience." Rebecca reluctantly stepped aside, but not before muttering something under her breath about following procedures. Jasmine boarded the aircraft, the brief confrontation having drawn unwanted attention. As she settled into her spacious seat 2A, she noticed sideways glances from other first-class passengers, primarily white businessmen. A woman across the aisle whispered to her companion, probably using points or got upgraded. The assumption that she couldn't legitimately afford first class was nothing new. Jasmine removed her laptop, determined to use the 3-hour flight productively rather than dwell on the incident. Flight attendant Brian began the pre-departure beverage service, moving methodically through the first-class cabin. "Sparkling water, please," requested the passenger in 1C. "Certainly, sir," Brian responded with practiced courtesy. He served 1A, 1B, 1C, then inexplicably skipped to 2B, making eye contact with every passenger except Jasmine. She waited patiently. Perhaps he'd return to her after serving the others. But after completing the service to all other first-class passengers, Brian began stowing the serving cart. "Excuse me," Jasmine said politely. "I haven't been offered a beverage." Brian looked startled, as if noticing her for the first time. "Oh, I apologize. What would you like?" "Sparkling water, no ice, with lemon if available." "We're actually out of sparkling water," he replied, despite having just served it to 3 other passengers. "Regular water is fine then," Jasmine responded, maintaining her professionalism despite the obvious lie. The water arrived without lemon, and Brian disappeared without another word. Jasmine opened her laptop, forcing herself to focus on the presentation she would deliver tomorrow, rather than the subtle indignities accumulating since her arrival at the airport. The contract with National Atlantic represented years of work and innovation. She wouldn't allow anything to distract her from ensuring its successful execution. But as the plane reached cruising altitude, she couldn't help wondering what other Challenges awaited on this journey to San Francisco. The real test would come not in the airport or aircraft, but in the boardroom, a battlefield she had mastered through years of breaking barriers in the tech industry. What happens when simple discrimination escalates into a full-blown confrontation at 37,000 feet? Have you ever witnessed someone being treated unfairly because of their race? Comment. Number 1. If you've ever stood up against discrimination, even when it was difficult. Don't forget to like this video if you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of their appearance. The beverage service continued as flight NA-207 reached its cruising altitude. Jasmine tried to concentrate on her work, but 30 minutes into the flight, the refreshment service began, and once again, Brian seemed to develop selective vision. He served every passenger in first class methodically, except for Jasmine. After waiting for him to correct his oversight, she finally pressed the call button. The soft chime sounded and the call light illuminated above her seat. Minutes passed. No response. She pressed it again. Finally, a different flight attendant, an older woman whose name tag read Caroline, approached with a tight smile. "May I help you?" "Yes," Jasmine replied evenly. "I seem to have been overlooked during the refreshment service." Caroline's eyes narrowed slightly. "Brian is handling first class today. I'll let him know." "Thank you. I'd appreciate that." 5 more minutes passed before Brian appeared, looking visibly annoyed. "Did you need something?" "Yes," Jasmine said, her tone professional but firm. "I wasn't served during the refreshment service, and when I pressed the call button, no one responded for quite some time." "We're very busy," he replied curtly. "What would you like?" "I'd like the cheese plate and a glass of the Cabernet, please." Brian returned with her order, practically dropping the items on her tray table before hurrying away without a word. A white man in his 50s sitting diagonally across from Jasmine had been watching the interactions with growing discomfort. After Brian left, he leaned slightly toward her. "That was completely unprofessional," he said quietly. "I've never seen service like that in first class." Jasmine nodded appreciatively. "Thank you for noticing." "Michael Thompson," he introduced himself. "I write for Tech Insider." "Jasmine Wright," she replied, offering a brief handshake. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Tech Fusion Global? I've followed your company's rise. Remarkable innovation in cybersecurity." Their conversation was interrupted by Caroline's return. She hovered by Jasmine's seat with a forced smile. "Madam, I couldn't help but notice you seem unsatisfied with your seating arrangement," she began in a tone loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Jasmine looked puzzled. "I'm sorry, but I haven't expressed any dissatisfaction with my seat." "Well, sometimes passengers find first class isn't what they expected," Caroline continued. "We have some lovely seats available in economy where you might feel more comfortable." The implication hung in the air, unmistakable. Michael Thompson's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "I'm quite comfortable right here in the seat I purchased, thank you," Jasmine replied, her voice steady, despite the growing knot of anger in her stomach. She discreetly removed her phone and began recording audio of the interaction. Caroline's smile tightened. "One of our regular premium customers has requested your specific seat. As a courtesy, we'd like to offer you—" "No," Jasmine interrupted firmly. "I booked and paid for seat 2A. I'm not relinquishing it to anyone, regular customer or otherwise." A white businessman in his 60s approached from further back in the cabin. He stopped beside Caroline, looking expectantly at Jasmine's seat. "Is there a problem here?" he asked with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way. "No problem at all, Mr. Winters," Caroline assured him. "Just a small seating misunderstanding we're resolving." "I don't see any misunderstanding," Jasmine stated clearly. "This is my assigned seat, and I'm staying in it." Caroline's pleasant facade cracked slightly. "Perhaps you don't understand how things work on National Atlantic. We value our loyal customers and I'm not one of them?" Jasmine challenged. "Because I've flown over 50,000 miles with National Atlantic. This year alone." Mr. Winters huffed impatiently. "I've been flying this route every week for 15 years. Always in 2A. Everyone knows that. I wasn't informed when I purchased this seat, Jasmine replied. And while I sympathize with your preference, that doesn't supersede my right to occupy the seat I paid for. Caroline's voice hardened. If you continue to be difficult, I'll need to involve the captain. Please do, Jasmine responded. I'd be interested to hear the official National Atlantic policy on displacing passengers from their assigned seats based on the preferences of other passengers. Michael Thompson was now openly taking notes on his tablet. Caroline stormed off toward the front of the aircraft. Minutes later, she returned with a stern-looking man in a pilot's uniform. I understand we have a situation, the captain said, addressing Jasmine directly. The situation, Jasmine replied calmly, is that your flight crew has consistently provided substandard service to me compared to other passengers, and is now attempting to move me from my assigned seat to accommodate another passenger's preference. The captain frowned. Ma'am, my crew has informed me that you've been disruptive and uncooperative. That's categorically false, Jasmine stated, and I have an audio recording of our interactions to prove it. The captain's expression darkened. Recording crew members is against our policy. Discriminating against passengers based on their race is against federal law, Jasmine countered. A tense silence fell over the first-class cabin. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably. I can verify that this passenger has been treated differently, Michael Thompson interjected. I've been watching the entire interaction. The captain assessed the situation, recognizing it was spiraling into potentially dangerous territory. What's your name, ma'am? Jasmine Wright, CEO of Tech Fusion Global. The effect was immediate. Caroline's eyes widened in recognition. The captain's demeanor changed instantly. Ms. Wright, I apologize for any misunderstanding. Of course you'll remain in your assigned seat. We value your business with National Atlantic. Do you? Jasmine questioned. Because every interaction I've had with your crew today suggests otherwise. Mr. Winters stormed back to his seat, muttering under his breath. The captain assured Jasmine the remainder of her flight would be without incident, but the damage was done. As he and Caroline retreated to the front of the plane, Michael Thompson leaned toward her again. I'd be interested in covering this story, he said quietly. What happened here isn't right. Jasmine considered his offer carefully. Let's exchange contact information. I have a meeting with National Atlantic executives tomorrow that might make your story even more interesting. The flight continued to San Francisco, with Brian suddenly becoming attentive to a fault, clearly having been instructed to provide impeccable service. But Jasmine's mind was already shifting from the airline contract to a much larger issue. How many other black passengers face similar treatment without the power of a CEO title to shield them? Have you ever had to reveal your credentials or status to receive basic respect? How would you have handled this situation if you were in Jasmine's position? Would you have stood your ground or moved to avoid conflict? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe if you want to find out what happens next in this incredible story of power, prejudice, and ultimate justice. The gleaming tower of the St. Regis San Francisco welcomed Jasmine as her car service pulled up to the entrance. Despite the luxury surroundings, the tension from the flight still clung to her like an unwelcome shadow. Welcome, Ms. Wright, greeted the concierge. We have you in our executive suite. May I assist with anything immediately? No, thank you, Jasmine replied, appreciating the respectful treatment that shouldn't feel like a relief, but somehow did after her flight experience. Once in her suite, Jasmine kicked off her heels and sank onto the plush sofa. She had exactly 22 hours before her scheduled meeting with National Atlantic Airlines executives. 22 hours to decide how to handle what had happened. Her phone buzzed with a text from Malcolm. Landed safely? Contract documents are ready for final review. Instead of texting back, she called him. Malcolm, we have a situation, she began, recounting the events on the flight in precise detail. That's outrageous, Malcolm responded, his voice tight with controlled anger. Do you want me to contact our legal team? Not yet. Let me think strategically about this. Jasmine walked to the window, gazing out at the San Francisco skyline. The National Atlantic deal represents a huge opportunity for Tech Fusion, but I'm not willing to partner with a company that tolerates discrimination. What are you considering? Options, she replied. I need you to quietly reach out to Pacific Airways and Transcontinental, see if they'd be interested in a similar partnership, perhaps even an exclusive one. On it. I'll be discreet. After ending the call, Jasmine opened her laptop and drafted an email to Eliza Washington, TechFusion's Chief Legal Counsel. She detailed the incident without emotional language, sticking to facts and timestamps. She concluded with, I'm not looking for personal compensation. I want structural change. Advise accordingly. Eliza's response came within 30 minutes. From a legal standpoint, you have grounds for a discrimination claim. However, given your position and the pending contract, this becomes more complex. Strategic options. 1. Proceed with contract, address incident separately. 2. Use leverage to demand policy changes before signing. 3. Walk away and make public statement. 4. Partner with competitor and explain why your call. Whatever you decide, we'll back you fully. Jasmine considered each option carefully. Throughout her career, she'd faced similar situations, though rarely so blatant. Each time, she'd had to calculate whether fighting the individual battle served the larger war. As a black woman in tech, she'd learned to pick her battles strategically. But this felt different. National Atlantic wasn't some small vendor. It was a major corporation about to pay TechFusion $200 million for their technology. The power dynamic, for once, favored her. A notification interrupted her thoughts. An email from National Atlantic's Public Relations Department. Dear Ms. Wright, it has come to our attention that you experienced some discomfort on your flight today. National Atlantic Airlines prides itself on customer service, and we sincerely apologize for any misunderstanding that may have occurred. As a gesture of goodwill, we'd like to offer you complimentary first-class tickets for your next 3 flights. We look forward to our partnership meeting tomorrow. Sincerely, Vanessa Miller, Public Relations Director, National Atlantic Airlines. Jasmine read the email twice, her indignation growing. They had categorized blatant discrimination as some discomfort and a misunderstanding. Their solution was to offer free tickets, as if the issue was about money rather than dignity and equal treatment. Her phone rang. Michael Thompson from the flight. Ms. Wright, I hope I'm not intruding, he began. I've been researching since we landed. This isn't the first discrimination complaint against National Atlantic. They've had several incidents, all quietly settled. I'm preparing an article, but I wanted to give you the courtesy of commenting before publication. I appreciate that, Michael. When are you planning to publish? Tomorrow afternoon. I know about your meeting with them. It adds an interesting business angle to the story, Jasmine thought quickly. Hold the story until after my meeting. I'll give you an exclusive interview about the outcome. That's a compelling offer, Michael replied. Agreed. After hanging up, Jasmine received another call, this time from her executive team, gathered for a virtual meeting about tomorrow's contract signing. For the next 3 hours, they reviewed every clause and contingency, prepared responses to potential questions, and finalized the presentation. Not once did Jasmine mention the incident on the plane or her growing reservations about the deal. That decision would be hers alone to make. As evening settled over San Francisco, Jasmine ordered room service and reviewed National Atlantic's diversity and inclusion policies, which she found buried deep on their corporate website. The language was vague, the commitments weak, and the accountability mechanisms non-existent. Her phone buzzed with an update from Malcolm. Both Pacific Airways and Transcontinental expressed immediate interest. Pacific Airways CEO Sarah Chen specifically asked to speak with you directly tomorrow morning before your National Atlantic meeting. Perfect. Options were materializing. Jasmine scheduled a 10 a.m. call with Sarah Chen, giving herself plenty of time before the 3 p.m. meeting with National Atlantic. The next morning brought news that early reports of the incident were circulating in industry circles. National Atlantic's stock had dipped slightly. Nothing dramatic, but a warning tremor. After a productive call with Sarah Chen, who offered not only to match National Atlantic's terms, but to implement TechFusion's security systems across Pacific's entire digital infrastructure, Jasmine felt confident in her position. She had a viable alternative if needed. At precisely 2:45 p.m., Jasmine Wright arrived at National Atlantic's San Francisco headquarters. She wore a crimson power suit, deliberately eye-catching and impossible to ignore. Her team of 4 executives followed, carrying the contract documentation that may or may not be signed today. As she entered the building, heads turned. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly. "Ms. Wright and the Tech Fusion Global team for our 3 p.m. with Richard Whitman," stated her chief operating officer. "Yes, of course," stammered the receptionist. "They're expecting you in the executive boardroom on the 42nd floor." As the elevator climbed, Jasmine's resolve strengthened. This meeting would determine more than a business partnership. It would establish whether National Atlantic Airlines deserved her company's technology and whether its leadership understood that in business, as in air travel, everyone deserved first-class treatment. The executive boardroom of National Atlantic Airlines occupied the entire northwest corner of the 42nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of San Francisco Bay, while a massive mahogany table dominated the center of the room. The walls displayed vintage airline advertisements, all featuring white passengers being served by attentive staff. Richard Whitman, National Atlantic's CEO, rose as Jasmine and her team entered. At 62, with silver hair and an expensive tan, he exuded the confidence of someone who had never been denied entry anywhere. "Ms. Wright, welcome." His smile revealed perfectly whitened teeth. "We're thrilled to finalize our partnership today." Jasmine accepted his handshake with a firm grip. "Mr. Whitman, thank you for hosting us." Introductions circled the table. National Atlantic's executive leadership consisted of 12 people, 11 white men and 1 white woman. Jasmine's team, by contrast, reflected the diversity she insisted on at Tech Fusion. 2 black women, 1 Asian man, and 1 white woman, all under 40. Coffee was served as everyone settled into their seats. Jasmine noticed that the server approached her last, despite her position at the head of the visiting delegation. "Shall we begin?" Richard suggested, nodding to his chief financial officer. For the next 45 minutes, both teams reviewed contract terms, technical specifications, and implementation timelines. The atmosphere remained cordial and professional. Jasmine participated actively, asking insightful questions and offering clarifications about Tech Fusion's technology. No one mentioned the incident on yesterday's flight. Either they were unaware, or, more likely, hoped it would be overlooked in the excitement of a $200 million deal. As the discussion moved toward marketing the partnership, Jasmine saw her opening. "Before we discuss the public announcement," she said, her voice pleasant but firm, "I'd like to share my experience as a National Atlantic customer yesterday." The room fell silent. Richard's smile faltered slightly. "Oh? I hope everything was satisfactory." Unfortunately, it was not. Jasmine recounted the events on the flight in precise, unemotional detail. She described the initial boarding confrontation, the repeated service failures, the attempt to move her from her assigned seat, and the captain's response. With each revelation, Richard's expression grew more alarmed. By the time she finished, his face had drained of color. "Ms. Wright," he began, his voice suddenly hoarse. I had no idea. This is absolutely unacceptable, and I assure you it doesn't reflect National Atlantic's values." "Doesn't it?" Jasmine asked quietly. "Because when I researched your company's history, I found 7 similar complaints in the past 18 months, alone. All involving black or brown passengers." The National Atlantic executives exchanged nervous glances. Richard's chief operating officer, Thomas Blackwell, attempted damage control. "These are regrettable isolated incidents, Ms. Wright. We have comprehensive staff training," "Which clearly isn't working," Jasmine interrupted. "Let me be direct. Tech Fusion Global does not partner with companies that tolerate discrimination, at any level." Richard leaned forward anxiously. "Jasmine, may I call you Jasmine? We value this partnership enormously. What happened to you was clearly a staff training issue that we'll address immediately." "Staff training?" Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Whitman, This isn't about training, it's about culture. Your employees felt comfortable displaying this behavior because they believed it aligned with your company's values, or at least that there would be no consequences. She removed her phone and placed it on the table. I recorded portions of the interactions. Would you like to hear them? Richard blanched. That won't be necessary. We believe you completely, and we're horrified. What can we do to make this right? That depends on what right means to you, Jasmine replied. If you're asking how to salvage this contract, that's one conversation. If you're asking how to transform your company's culture, that's another entirely. Thomas Blackwell whispered something to Richard, who nodded quickly. Ms. Wright, Richard said, his business instincts kicking in. We value this partnership immensely. To demonstrate our commitment, we're prepared to increase the contract value to $250 million. The room fell silent again, but for a different reason. Richard had just made a critical error, attempting to buy her silence rather than address the underlying issue. Jasmine closed the contract folder in front of her. Mr. Whitman, my dignity isn't for sale. Not for $50 million. Not for any amount. That's not what Richard backpedaled. We just want to show our commitment to making this right. Making it right starts with acknowledging the real problem, Jasmine stated. The issue isn't that a black CEO experienced discrimination on your airline. The issue is that anyone experiences discrimination on your airline, regardless of their title or economic status. She stood and her team immediately followed suit. I came here today prepared to sign a landmark deal between our companies. Instead, I discovered that National Atlantic's corporate culture is fundamentally misaligned with Tech Fusion's values. Please, Richard stood as well, panic evident in his voice. Let's not be hasty. We can fix this. I'll personally ensure that the flight crew involved is terminated immediately. This isn't about individuals, Mr. Whitman. It's about systems and culture. Firing a few employees won't solve your problem. It will just teach the rest to hide their behavior better. Jasmine gathered her documents. When National Atlantic is ready to commit to meaningful structural changes in how it approaches diversity and inclusion, Tech Fusion will reconsider this partnership. Until then, we'll be pursuing other opportunities. What kind of changes? Richard asked desperately. Tell us what you want, and we'll do it. That's exactly the problem, Jasmine replied. You shouldn't need me to tell you how to create an equitable environment for your employees and passengers. The fact that you're asking proves you're not ready for this partnership. As she turned to leave, Richard made one final attempt. The board meets tomorrow. Give us 48 hours to develop a comprehensive response. Please, don't walk away from 2 years of negotiations over one unfortunate incident. Jasmine paused at the door. It wasn't unfortunate, Mr. Whitman. It was revealing. And it wasn't one incident. It was a pattern laid bare. You have 24 hours, not 48. My team will expect your proposal by this time tomorrow. With that, Jasmine Wright and her executives exited the boardroom, leaving behind stunned silence and the lingering scent of her Chanel perfume. As they descended in the elevator, her chief marketing officer whispered, "That was magnificent. But are we really walking away from $200 million? Jasmine smiled confidently. We're not walking away from anything. We're leveraging our position to demand necessary change. And if National Atlantic can't deliver that change, Pacific Airways is ready to step in with better terms and a more aligned corporate culture." The elevator doors opened to the lobby, where several employees had gathered, apparently having heard about the abrupt conclusion of the meeting. Whispers followed Jasmine's team as they exited the building into the bright San Francisco afternoon. By the time they reached their waiting cars, Jasmine's phone was already buzzing with notifications. Word was spreading fast, and the real corporate fallout was about to begin. Have you ever witnessed the domino effect of one powerful decision? What would you risk to stand up for your principles? Comment number 1 if you believe business ethics should never be compromised for profit. Hit that like button if you admire leaders who put values before valuations. Within an hour of Jasmine Wright's departure from National Atlantic headquarters, trading algorithms detected unusual activity around the airline's stock. By market close, National Atlantic shares had dropped 3%. a modest decline that nonetheless represented millions in market capitalization. In her hotel suite, Jasmine fielded calls from her board members, who expressed varying degrees of concern and support for her decision to delay the contract signing. "The board chair is worried about shareholder reaction," Malcolm reported after coordinating communications all afternoon. But he also said, and I quote, "If anyone can turn principle into profit, it's Jasmine." Jasmine smiled at that. Throughout her career, she'd proven that ethical business practices and profitability weren't mutually exclusive. "What's happening at National Atlantic?" she asked. Malcolm consulted his tablet. "Sources say Richard Whitman called an emergency executive meeting immediately after you left. Their general counsel and diversity officer were both summoned, though apparently they don't even have a full-time diversity officer, just someone who has it as a secondary responsibility. That tells me everything I need to know about their priorities," Jasmine noted. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael Thompson. "Story's ready, waiting for your go-ahead as promised." "Tell him to publish," Jasmine instructed Malcolm, "and send him our official statement." Within minutes, the headline appeared on Tech Insider's website. "Tech Fusion CEO faces discrimination on National Atlantic flight, puts $200 deal on hold." The article detailed the incident and included statements from other passengers who corroborated Jasmine's account. It concluded with Tech Fusion's official statement. "Tech Fusion Global seeks partners whose actions, not just words, demonstrate a commitment to equality and dignity for all. We are evaluating whether National Atlantic Airlines meets this standard." Social media exploded almost immediately. The hashtag Boycott National Atlantic began trending, with thousands sharing their own experiences of discrimination on the airline. Black business leaders posted messages of support for Jasmine's stance. Screenshots of National Atlantic's diversity statement, full of platitudes but short on specifics, circulated with mocking commentary. By early evening, National Atlantic attempted damage control with a hastily written press release. National Atlantic Airlines regrets the misunderstanding experienced by Tech Fusion Global CEO Jasmine Wright. We are investigating the incident and reaffirm our commitment to providing excellent service to all passengers regardless of race, gender, or background. We look forward to continuing our partnership discussions with Tech Fusion Global. The statement only fueled further criticism. "Misunderstanding" became a sarcastic rallying cry online, with commentators pointing out how the language minimized clear discriminatory behavior. Jasmine's phone rang continuously with interview requests from major business publications and news networks. She declined them all, choosing strategic silence while National Atlantic floundered in the spotlight. Instead, she focused on her call with Pacific Airways CEO Sarah Chen. "I've been following the developments," Sarah said when they connected. "I want you to know that our offer stands $200 million for the initial implementation, with potential expansion to $300 million for our international routes." "And your diversity initiatives?" Jasmine inquired. "We'd like to do better," Sarah admitted candidly. "Our statistics are above industry average, but that's a low bar. We're open to establishing new standards in partnership with Tech Fusion." "That's exactly what I want to discuss," Jasmine replied. "I'm developing what I'm calling the Wright Standards, a comprehensive framework for equitable practices in customer service and corporate culture. Would Pacific Airways be interested in becoming the first signatory?" "Absolutely," Sarah confirmed without hesitation. "Send me the details, and we can announce it alongside our partnership." As Jasmine ended the call, Malcolm entered with fresh information. National Atlantic's board has called an emergency session for tomorrow morning. Internal sources say Richard Whitman's leadership is being questioned. "Not surprising," Jasmine noted. "The stock drop is just beginning. The real impact will come from corporate clients reconsidering their business travel contracts." Her prediction proved accurate. By 9 that evening, 3 major corporations had announced they were reviewing their exclusive travel arrangements with National Atlantic. The airline's social media accounts were overwhelmed with negative comments, forcing them to limit responses. Meanwhile, Jasmine received an unexpected call from Elaine Johnson, a pioneering black aviation executive who had recently retired as chief operating officer of a major airline. "Ms. Wright, We haven't met, but I've followed your career with admiration, Elaine began. I wanted you to know that what you're doing could transform the industry. For decades, airlines have treated diversity as a public relations exercise rather than a business imperative. That's exactly the problem I'm trying to address, Jasmine agreed. The Wright Standards will establish concrete benchmarks for inclusive practices, with real accountability mechanisms. I'd like to help, Elaine offered. My experience could be valuable in developing practical implementation strategies. I'd welcome your input, Jasmine replied, an idea forming. Actually, there might be an even more direct way for you to influence the industry. By morning, National Atlantic's stock had dropped another 5% in pre-market trading. Financial analysts were issuing concerned reports about the potential long-term impact on the airline's corporate contracts and public image. Richard Whitman made a desperate attempt to contact Jasmine directly, bypassing formal channels. Ms. Wright, please, his voicemail pleaded. The board is meeting in 2 hours. I need something positive to report, or my position is in jeopardy. Jasmine did not return his call. Instead, she sent a formal email to National Atlantic's Board of Directors. I understand you're meeting this morning to discuss recent events. Before you make decisions based on limited information, I invite you to consider a transformative approach. The attached document outlines the Wright Standards for equitable business practices. National Atlantic can become a leader by adopting these standards, or it can continue to treat diversity as a peripheral concern. Your choice will determine whether TechFusion Global proceeds with our partnership. I'm available to discuss this framework with the full board at your convenience. She attached the comprehensive document she'd worked on through the night with input from Elaine Johnson and her own executive team. The standards included measurable goals for diversity at all levels, transparent reporting mechanisms, independent audits of customer experience sorted by demographic data, and meaningful consequences for non-compliance. Malcolm updated her on the latest developments. Pacific Airways has verbally agreed to all terms of the Wright Standards and is prepared to announce our partnership tomorrow. 3 other airlines have reached out asking about the standards, and Michael Thompson's article has been picked up by major news outlets nationwide. Jasmine nodded, satisfied with the momentum building behind her initiative. And National Atlantic? Their board meeting started 30 minutes ago. No communication yet. They'll either emerge with a transformative commitment or a desperate attempt to save face, Jasmine predicted. Either way, the industry is changing as we speak. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Wright, this is Thomas Blackwell, COO of National Atlantic. May I speak with you urgently? The board is requesting your presence. Jasmine considered the request carefully. Tell them, I'll join virtually in 30 minutes. I want the entire board present, not just representatives. As she prepared for the video call that could reshape an industry, Jasmine reflected on how far the situation had evolved from a single discriminatory incident. What had begun as personal disrespect was catalyzing institutional change that could benefit millions of travelers. The real question now was whether National Atlantic would seize the opportunity to lead that change, or become a cautionary tale of what happens when corporations fail to recognize that diversity isn't just about image, but about fundamental business values. How far would you go to stand up for what's right? Would you risk a multi-million-dollar deal to fight discrimination? And what responsibility do you think powerful executives have to create change beyond their own companies? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to see how this confrontation reaches its dramatic conclusion. Jasmine sat centered in the frame for the video call with National Atlantic's Board of Directors. She chose a neutral background, her hotel suite's living area, and wore the same crimson suit from yesterday's meeting. Optics mattered, especially now. Malcolm arranged 3 tablets before her, displaying real-time social media analytics, stock market data, and incoming press inquiries. TechFusion's communications team and legal counsel were on standby in adjacent rooms. At precisely 11:30 a.m., the call connected. 14 faces appeared on screen. The 12-member board, Richard Whitman, and the corporate secretary recording the proceedings. Board Chair William Henderson spoke first. Ms. Wright, thank you for joining us on short notice. We've reviewed your proposal for the Wright Standards and wish to discuss implementation possibilities. Jasmine noted the careful phrasing. Not acceptance. Implementation possibilities. I appreciate the opportunity, she replied. Before we discuss implementation, I'd like to understand whether National Atlantic's board acknowledges the systemic nature of the issues I experienced. Uncomfortable glances exchanged across the video grid. Richard Whitman looked particularly tense, his usual confidence evaporated. Henderson cleared his throat. We've conducted an initial investigation and found concerning patterns that suggest your experience wasn't isolated. We're deeply troubled by this and committed to meaningful change. That's a start, Jasmine acknowledged. The Wright Standards offer a comprehensive framework for that change. They're designed to be challenging but achievable, with clear metrics for success. For the next 30 minutes, Jasmine walked them through the key components. Diverse hiring targets at all levels, customer experience monitoring disaggregated by passenger demographics, mandatory inclusion training with measurable outcomes, executive compensation tied to diversity goals, and transparent annual reporting. Implementation would require significant resources, noted Diane Mercer, the only female board member. Have you considered a phased approach? I have, Jasmine replied. The document includes a 3-year implementation timeline. However, certain elements, particularly the customer experience monitoring and initial executive training, must begin immediately. Richard Whitman, who had remained uncharacteristically silent, finally spoke. Ms. Wright, the board has asked me to inquire about the status of our contract should we adopt these standards. Jasmine met his gaze directly through the camera. Full adoption of the Wright Standards, with the agreed timeline and accountability mechanisms, would allow us to proceed with the partnership, with amended terms reflecting our new understanding. Amended how? Henderson asked cautiously. The contract value remains $200 million, Jasmine clarified. However, 20% of payments would be contingent on meeting diversity benchmarks. Additionally, Tech Fusion would require board representation to monitor implementation. More uncomfortable glances. This went beyond typical business terms into governance territory. We'll need time to consider these conditions, Henderson stated. Of course, Jasmine replied. However, I should mention that Pacific Airways has already agreed to implement the Wright Standards in full, including the accountability provisions. They've offered comparable terms for our technology. The statement had its intended effect. Board members leaned forward, concern evident. You're negotiating with our competitors? Richard asked, his voice strained. I'm pursuing partnerships with companies aligned with Tech Fusion's values, Jasmine corrected. Currently, Pacific Airways is demonstrating stronger alignment than National Atlantic, Henderson conferred briefly with other board members off camera. We'll need 2 hours to discuss internally. Can we reconvene at 2 p.m.? Unfortunately, I have a commitment at that time, Jasmine replied. It wasn't entirely true, but strategic pressure was necessary. I can make myself available at 4 p.m. However, I should note that I've promised Michael Thompson an exclusive interview about the resolution of this situation by end of day. We'll be ready at 4 p.m., Henderson confirmed hastily. As the call ended, Malcolm entered with fresh updates. Pacific Airways stock is up 3% today. They're letting rumors circulate about a major tech partnership announcement. Perfect timing, Jasmine noted. And the coalition? Growing by the hour. 6 more Black business leaders have signed on to support the Wright Standards. The Business Equality Network wants to endorse it formally and help with implementation across industries. Jasmine nodded with satisfaction. What had begun as a response to personal discrimination was evolving into a movement for corporate accountability. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elaine Johnson. Just received a very interesting call from a National Atlantic board member. They're asking about my availability for a senior leadership role. Should I engage? Jasmine smiled. Her suggestion was bearing fruit faster than expected. Absolutely, but make your conditions clear. While waiting for the follow-up board meeting, Jasmine connected with Tech Fusion's executive team to brief them on developments. They unanimously supported her approach, recognizing that the potential industry-wide impact transcended the immediate business considerations. We're setting a new standard for how companies respond to discrimination, noted her chief marketing officer. This could define Tech Fusion's legacy beyond our technology. At 3:30 p.m., 30 minutes before the scheduled reconvening, Jasmine received an unexpected call from William Henderson directly. "Ms. Wright, I wanted to speak with you privately before our formal meeting," he began. "The board has voted to accept the Wright Standards in full, including the accountability provisions." "I'm pleased to hear that," Jasmine replied, maintaining her professional tone despite the victory. "There's more," Henderson continued. "We've also determined that this situation reflects a need for leadership change at National Atlantic. Richard Whitman has agreed to step down, effective immediately. This was unexpected. I appreciate the board taking decisive action. May I ask who will be stepping into the CEO role?" "That's actually why I'm calling," Henderson said. "We're extending an offer to Elaine Johnson to become our new CEO. She indicated you might have influenced her interest in the position." "Elaine is exceptionally qualified," Jasmine stated carefully. "Her experience and vision would serve National Atlantic well during this transformation. She's made her acceptance conditional on several factors, including your personal endorsement and proceeding with the Tech Fusion partnership." Jasmine allowed herself a small smile. Elaine was playing her cards perfectly. If the board formally adopts the Wright Standards with the accountability measures we've discussed, and if Elaine accepts the CEO position, Tech Fusion would be prepared to proceed with our partnership. "Excellent," Henderson sounded relieved. "We'll announce these changes at tomorrow's press conference. Would you be willing to appear alongside Elaine to demonstrate unity in this new direction?" "I would," Jasmine agreed. "Send the details to my team for coordination." After ending the call, Jasmine sat in momentary silence, absorbing the magnitude of what had just transpired. A discriminatory incident during a routine flight had catalyzed the appointment of the first black female CEO of a major U.S. airline, the creation of industry-wide standards for equitable treatment, and a fundamental shift in how corporate America viewed diversity, not as a peripheral concern, but as central to business success. Malcolm knocked gently before entering. "Pacific Airways is getting anxious about our decision. Tell Sarah I'll call her personally within the hour," Jasmine replied. "And contact Michael Thompson. He's got an exclusive story about corporate transformation, not just corporate accountability." As Malcolm departed, Jasmine gazed out at the San Francisco skyline. The real work was just beginning. The Wright Standards would need to be implemented, monitored, and enforced. The partnership with National Atlantic would require vigilance to ensure the changes weren't merely cosmetic. But today marked a turning point, proof that economic power, strategically deployed in service of ethical principles, could transform systems that had long seemed immutable. In refusing to accept discrimination even when cloaked in the banality of airline service issues, Jasmine Wright had demonstrated how business leaders could and should respond when confronted with injustice. Her phone buzzed with a message from her father back in Detroit. "Just saw the news. Your mother would have been so proud." That, more than anything, confirmed she had made the right choice. The 24 hours following National Atlantic's leadership shakeup unfolded with dizzying speed. The airline's board worked through the night with their legal team to formalize adoption of the Wright Standards, while Elaine Johnson assembled her conditions for accepting the CEO position. Jasmine maintained strategic pressure by keeping communications open with Pacific Airways, making it clear that National Atlantic's transformative promises would need to be backed by binding commitments before Tech Fusion finalized any partnership. Their stock dropped another 4% in after-hours trading, Malcolm reported during their morning strategy session. Financial analysts are questioning whether they can recover from this PR crisis. They can, if they embrace genuine change, rather than just damage control, Jasmine replied. Has Richard Whitman made any public statements? Only a brief press release announcing his resignation to pursue other opportunities. No mention of the discrimination incident or the reasons behind the leadership change. Jasmine wasn't surprised. Corporate America had perfected the art of euphemistic departures that protected both egos and legal liabilities. Her phone rang, Elaine Johnson calling for their scheduled strategy discussion before the day's negotiations. "The board is in panic mode," Elaine reported without preamble. They're willing to accept almost any terms to stabilize the situation. Then we push for maximum impact, Jasmine decided. Beyond implementing the Wright Standards internally, we want National Atlantic to require them from all major vendors and partners. Creating a multiplier effect, Elaine noted approvingly. I've already suggested similar extensions. My acceptance conditions include authority to restructure the executive team and a board commitment to increase diversity by 50% within 18 months. Perfect alignment, Jasmine confirmed. What's your read on William Henderson? Can he be trusted to support these changes long-term? Henderson is a pragmatist, Elaine assessed. He recognizes that diversity isn't just a moral imperative, but a business necessity in today's environment. He'll support the changes as long as they demonstrate positive impact on the bottom line. Then we'll ensure they do, Jasmine stated, confidently. The research is clear. Diverse companies outperform homogeneous ones. We just need to help National Atlantic implement effectively. Their strategic alignment established, Jasmine prepared for Richard Whitman's unexpected request for a private meeting before the formal negotiations. Despite reservations about his motives, she agreed to see him at her hotel, with Malcolm present as a witness. Richard arrived looking haggard. The polished executive persona crumbled under pressure. His suit was immaculate as always, but stress, lines etched his face, and his characteristic confidence had evaporated. "Thank you for seeing me, Ms. Wright," he began, declining the offered seat. He seemed too agitated to sit. "I wanted to speak with you directly, outside the formal negotiations." "I'm listening," Jasmine replied neutrally. "The board has given me an ultimatum," he admitted, pacing the suite's living area. "Either I facilitate a smooth transition that salvages the Tech Fusion deal, or they'll announce that I was terminated rather than resigned." Jasmine maintained her professional composure. "That puts you in a difficult position." "It does," Richard agreed, stopping to face her directly. "But I didn't come to ask for your help protecting my reputation. I came to tell you that you were right." This was unexpected. Jasmine raised an eyebrow but remained silent. "The culture at National Atlantic is broken," Richard continued. "I didn't create the problem, but I allowed it to persist. I prioritized quarterly results over addressing systemic issues that were evident to anyone paying attention. Recognition is the first step toward change," Jasmine acknowledged. "The second step is new leadership," Richard stated flatly. "Elaine, Johnson is the right choice to transform National Atlantic. I'll do everything possible to support her success, including making a public statement acknowledging the discrimination you experienced and my failure to create a culture where such behavior would be unthinkable." Jasmine studied him carefully, assessing his sincerity. "That would be meaningful, especially coming from you rather than a corporate communications team." Richard nodded. "There's something else. The board is resistant to your suggestion about Elaine's appointment. They're considering counter-proposals, including offering you a board seat instead of implementing all the accountability measures." "Divide and conquer?" Jasmine shook her head. "That won't work. Elaine's leadership and the Wright Standards are non-negotiable components of any path forward." "I told them as much," Richard sighed. "But they're desperate for alternatives that give them more control over the narrative." This insider information was valuable. "Thank you for your candor, Richard." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for the incident on the flight, but for creating an environment where such behavior was tolerated. You deserved better. All our passengers deserve better." After Richard departed, Jasmine immediately called Elaine to share the information about the board's potential resistance. "Not surprising," Elaine responded. "Corporations reflexively resist meaningful accountability. We need to present a united front with no daylight between our positions." "Agreed. Let's request a joint meeting rather than separate negotiations. They can't play us against each other if we're in the same room." Within the hour, William Henderson reluctantly agreed to the joint meeting format. The session was scheduled for 2 p.m. at National Atlantic's headquarters. As Jasmine's car approached the familiar building, breaking news alerts flashed across her phone. National Atlantic names first black female CEO. The board had apparently decided to announce Elaine's appointment ahead of the final negotiations, hoping to generate positive press and stabilize their stock price. "They're trying to seize control of the narrative," Malcolm observed, showing Jasmine the press release. "Notice they're highlighting Elaine's appointment, but only vaguely mentioning enhanced diversity initiatives without any specific commitments to the Wright Standards." "Predictable," Jasmine noted calmly. "They want the publicity benefits without the accountability. Let's see how they handle having both of us in the room." The boardroom atmosphere was markedly different from her previous visit. Several board members were physically present this time, including William Henderson and Diane Mercer. Richard Whitman was notably absent. Elaine Johnson had positioned herself at the head of the table, a power move that established her authority from the outset. She wore a navy suit with subtle gold accessories, projecting both professionalism and confidence. "Thank you all for agreeing to this joint session," Henderson began, his tone carefully modulated. "We're excited to announce Elaine's appointment as CEO and to finalize our partnership with Tech Fusion Global." "Before we proceed," Elaine interjected smoothly, "I need to clarify something. The press release went out without my final approval. My acceptance of the CEO position remains contingent on the full implementation of the Wright Standards, including all accountability measures." Henderson's smile tightened. "Of course, we're committed to implementing comprehensive diversity initiatives. The Wright Standards specifically," Jasmine corrected. "Not generic diversity initiatives. The details and accountability mechanisms are non-negotiable." "Additionally," Elaine continued, "my acceptance requires board approval of my authority to restructure the executive leadership team and implement the 50% board diversity requirement we discussed." The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Henderson attempted another diplomatic pivot. "While we fully support Elaine's vision for a more inclusive national Atlantic, we have concerns about some specific metrics and timelines." "Which metrics exactly?" Jasmine challenged. "The passenger experience monitoring, the executive compensation ties to diversity outcomes, or the public reporting requirements?" Her direct questioning left no room for evasion. Henderson looked to his colleagues for support, but found none forthcoming. Diane Mercer, the lone female board member, finally broke the awkward silence. "Let's be direct. Some board members are concerned about the binding nature of these standards and the potential business implications of tying executive compensation to diversity metrics. The business implications of not doing so are currently reflected in your stock price," Jasmine pointed out, "down nearly 10% in 2 days. And facing potential class action litigation," added Elaine. "My legal team has identified 7 discrimination complaints that were quietly settled in the past year alone. Without structural change, that pattern will continue." The combination of external pressure and insider knowledge proved powerful. Henderson conferred briefly with the other board members, then straightened his shoulders. "The board is prepared to accept the Wright Standards in full, including the accountability provisions and executive compensation components," he announced. "We're also prepared to approve Elaine's authority to restructure the executive team and implement the board diversity requirement over the agreed 18-month timeline. In writing, with the full board signatures," Jasmine specified, "before we finalize the Tech Fusion contract." "Agreed," Henderson conceded. For the next 3 hours, attorneys from both sides drafted the binding agreements that would cement National Atlantic's transformation. The expanded partnership with Tech Fusion, now valued at $250 million, with specific performance benchmarks tied to implementation of the Wright Standards. As the documents were being finalized, breaking news alerts illuminated phones around the table. Pacific Airways announces major diversity initiative, cites Wright Standards as model. Sarah Chen had strategically timed her announcement to maintain competitive pressure on National Atlantic. Henderson glanced at the alert with dismay. "They're positioning themselves as industry leaders while we're still finalizing our approach. You can still be first to fully implement," Jasmine noted. "The announcement is just words until actions follow." By late afternoon, all documents were signed. National Atlantic had committed to comprehensive transformation of its corporate culture, leadership, and practices. Tech Fusion had secured not just a lucrative contract, but a platform for industry-wide impact through the Wright Standards. As the meeting concluded, Elaine took Jasmine aside. "We've made history today, but the real work is just beginning." "I know," Jasmine agreed. "Implementing these changes will face resistance at every level. That's why your leadership is so crucial. And your continued partnership," Elaine emphasized. "The technology integration gives you ongoing leverage to ensure compliance with the standards." "Partners in transformation," Jasmine confirmed, shaking Elaine's hand firmly. As she left National Atlantic headquarters, Jasmine felt a profound sense of accomplishment. What had begun as a discriminatory incident on a routine flight had catalyzed structural change that would benefit countless employees and passengers for years to come. Her phone buzzed with a message from Michael Thompson. "Ready for that exclusive interview? This story just keeps getting better." Jasmine smiled. Indeed it did. And the most important chapters were still being written. 6 weeks after the historic agreements were signed, Jasmine Wright returned to Chicago O'Hare International Airport for another flight on National Atlantic Airlines. This time, however, everything was different. The company's logo now appeared, alongside a new tagline, "Where everyone flies first class." The check-in area featured prominent displays, announcing the airline's commitment to the Wright Standards, with QR codes linking to detailed information about the initiative and reporting mechanisms for any service disparities. "Good morning, Ms. Wright," greeted the premium check-in agent. "We're honored to have you flying with us today. Your first-class seat is confirmed, and the cabin crew has been notified of your boarding." The interaction was professional and respectful, exactly what every passenger deserved, regardless of their name recognition or status. As Jasmine proceeded through security and toward the first-class lounge, she noticed subtle but significant changes throughout the terminal. National Atlantic staff now reflected greater diversity, and new training practices were evident in their interactions with all passengers. The ceremony celebrating the expanded partnership between TechFusion Global and National Atlantic Airlines was scheduled for that afternoon in New York. Elaine Johnson would be unveiling the first aircraft equipped with TechFusion's advanced security and passenger experience technology, symbolizing the dual transformation of the airline's digital infrastructure and corporate culture. In the 6 weeks since Elaine had taken the helm, National Atlantic had moved with surprising speed to implement the Wright Standards. The initial shareholder skepticism had faded as the airline's stock recovered and then surpassed its previous trading range. Industry analysts were now citing National Atlantic as a case study in crisis management and corporate transformation. "Ms. Wright?" A familiar voice interrupted Jasmine's thoughts as she sat in the first-class lounge reviewing presentation notes. She looked up to see Caroline, the senior flight attendant who had been central to the discriminatory incident that catalyzed all these changes. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Caroline asked, her demeanor markedly different from their previous encounter. Jasmine nodded, gesturing to the seat across from her. "I'm not sure if you know this," Caroline began, her voice trembling slightly, "but I wasn't fired after what happened. Instead, I was reassigned to help develop the new crew training program based on the Wright Standards." "I'm aware," Jasmine replied. Elaine mentioned the decision. She believed that transformation requires engagement rather than just punishment. Caroline nodded. "It's been enlightening. The training forced me to confront biases I didn't even realize I held." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I'm not here to make excuses for my behavior. I'm here to thank you for not just demanding my termination, which would have been justified. Instead, you created a path for genuine change, not just for the airline, but for people like me who needed to do better." The sincerity in Caroline's voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a corporate-mandated apology, but a genuine expression of personal growth. "The goal was never punishment," Jasmine explained. "It was transformation. I'm glad you found value in the process." "More than value," Caroline affirmed. "Purpose. I now lead workshops helping other crew members recognize and address unconscious bias. Your experience and your response to it has changed countless lives, including mine." As Caroline departed, Jasmine reflected on the unexpected ripple effects of standing firm on her principles. The changes at National Atlantic extended far beyond policies and procedures to touch individual lives and mindsets. The boarding process for her flight to New York demonstrated the practical implementation of the Wright Standards. The ground crew and flight attendants showed consistent professionalism with all passengers. The cabin crew, now visibly more diverse, provided attentive service throughout the journey. Arriving at JFK Airport, Jasmine was greeted by Malcolm and her executive team, who had flown in earlier to prepare for the ceremony. "Everything's ready at the hangar," Malcolm reported as they traveled to the event venue. "Media attendance exceeds expectations, and Elaine just confirmed that 5 other airline CEOs will be present. The industry is paying attention," Jasmine noted with satisfaction. "More than paying attention," Malcolm corrected. 3 more airlines have formally adopted the Wright Standards since Pacific Airways made their announcement. It's becoming the industry benchmark faster than we anticipated. The ceremonial hangar at JFK had been transformed for the occasion. A National Atlantic Boeing 787 Dreamliner, newly emblazoned with both companies' logos, formed the backdrop for the stage. Hundreds of guests, including industry executives, media representatives, and employees from both organizations, filled the space. As Jasmine took her place on stage alongside Elaine Johnson, she noted the symbolic power of the moment. 2 Black women leading major corporations, partnering to transform an industry with a long history of both technological innovation and social stagnation. Elaine approached the podium first, her presence commanding immediate attention. Today marks not just a business partnership, but a commitment to fundamental change in how we serve our passengers, value our employees, and define success as a corporation. The Wright Standards aren't just named after Jasmine Wright. They embody what is right about business when it prioritizes dignity alongside dividends. The audience applauded enthusiastically, particularly the National Atlantic employees present. In just 6 weeks, Elaine had earned their respect through decisive leadership and transparent communication about the transformation process. When it was Jasmine's turn to speak, she focused on the broader implications. What began as a personal experience of discrimination has evolved into an industry-wide movement for accountability and inclusion. The technology Tech Fusion is providing to National Atlantic will revolutionize the security and efficiency of air travel. But the cultural changes we're celebrating today will transform the human experience of flying for passengers and employees alike. After the formal ceremony, Jasmine was approached by numerous airline executives eager to discuss implementing the Wright Standards in their own organizations. What had started as a response to discrimination had become a competitive advantage that companies were now actively seeking. As the event concluded, Jasmine and Elaine shared a quiet moment away from the crowds. "The board diversity requirement is already ahead of schedule," Elaine reported. 3 new members with impressive qualifications join next month, and the passenger experience metrics are showing measurable improvement across all demographic groups. "That's the true measure of success," Jasmine noted. "Not just better treatment for people who look like us, but equitable treatment for everyone." 1 month later, Jasmine returned to National Atlantic for another flight. This time, she deliberately booked under her married name, which she rarely used professionally, to test the system without name recognition. The experience was flawless, exactly what every passenger deserved. From check-in to landing, she observed consistent, respectful service for all passengers regardless of appearance, accent, or apparent status. In the terminal, she noticed a young Black girl, perhaps 10 years old, intently watching airline operations, with evident fascination. Her mother stood nearby, checking departure information. The girl recognized Jasmine from news coverage and tugged her mother's sleeve excitedly. "Mom, that's her. That's the lady who made them change everything." Jasmine approached with a warm smile. "Are you interested in aviation?" The girl nodded enthusiastically. "I want to be a pilot, or maybe run an airline someday." "What's your name?" Jasmine asked. "Zoe," the girl replied. Jasmine removed a business card from her wallet and wrote her personal email address on the back. "Well, Zoe, when you finish school, call me. I'll make sure there's a place for you, whether at Tech Fusion or wherever your dreams take you." Zoe clutched the card reverently while her mother expressed grateful astonishment. "The world will be different by the time she's ready," Jasmine assured them. "We're making sure of that." As she continued toward her gate, Jasmine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. One discriminatory incident on a routine flight had sparked transformation across an industry, not because she was a CEO with economic leverage, though that had certainly helped, but because she had refused to accept treatment that no passenger should endure. The true victory wasn't the signed contracts or public accolades. It was the knowledge that someone like Zoe would enter a workforce where her talents and contributions would be valued without the barriers Jasmine had faced. The Wright Standards weren't just about airline policies or corporate practices. They were about creating a world where excellence could truly be the only response to prejudice, because prejudice itself was no longer tolerated. National Atlantic Airlines had been transformed not because one woman was denied a first-class seat, but because she had refused to stand for it, and in doing so, had helped an entire industry rise higher. What would you do if faced with discrimination? Would you have the courage to stand firm like Jasmine Wright? If this story inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more powerful accounts of people standing up against injustice. Share this video with someone who needs to know their dignity is non-negotiable. Comment below with your own experiences of standing up for what's right, because every voice matters in the ongoing journey toward true equality. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect is not just personal success, but creating change that lifts everyone higher. Jasmine Wright's journey teaches us that real change requires courage, strategy, and the willingness to leverage power for good. When faced with discrimination, she didn't just seek personal redress. She created systemic transformation. The C-Team story illustrates that true leadership means holding companies accountable rather than accepting hollow apologies or token gestures. We also learn that economic power, when wielded ethically, can force institutions to confront uncomfortable truths. Jasmine's approach demonstrates that diversity isn't just a moral imperative, but a business necessity. Companies that resist meaningful inclusion risk both reputation and revenue. Perhaps most importantly, the story shows that individual actions matter. By refusing to accept discrimination, Jasmine created ripple effects benefiting countless others who lacked her leverage. She understood that dignity is non-negotiable at any level, and that lasting change comes not from firing individuals, but transforming cultures. The Wright Standards succeeded because they included concrete metrics, accountability mechanisms, and consequences, proving that effective diversity initiatives require more than good intentions. They need measurable commitments and transparent reporting. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wished you could make a difference? What would you do if you had Jasmine's power and influence? Comment below with a time you stood up against injustice or how you might use your position to create positive change. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find this important message. Subscribe for more powerful stories of courage and transformation in the face of adversity. Share this video with someone who needs inspiration to stand up for what's right. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Remember, real change happens when we refuse to accept the unacceptable, no matter who we are or what position we hold. Together, we can transform industries and create a more equitable world.